So now, and without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Mrs. Reem Turkistani. She holds a master's degree in applied linguistics from Qura University. She teaches English for general and specific purpose at ELC. Also, she got English proficiency courses from St. Giles, London, and gave various workshops in the new methods of teaching English for medical purpose. So now I'm just going to turn over this forum to you, Mrs. Reem. How are you today? And you can start when you want, please.
Okay, thank you very much, brother. Is my voice clear? Hello?
Yes, okay.
واضح?
Yes.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is Reem Turkistani from the English Language Center at Qura University. And today, inshallah, I would like to welcome all of you to the Professional Development Program provided by the English Language Center. I'm going to give a presentation about the effective methods for flipped classroom in EFL context. I will start by giving an introduction of this method. This is going to be clarified by shedding light on the old classes of teaching English or old schools of English, showing some history of this technique. This will also be related to Bloom's taxonomy. I'm going also to give or provide some examples of how to implement this method in the EFL context. This will be also followed by some tips and tricks for successful implementation. And I'm going also to provide some points to keep in mind if you want to go ahead with this unit. So before I start, I would like to ask you some questions. Now, if we go back to our teaching, let's say 3 or 4 years ago, we were all teaching actual teaching, face-to-face teaching. Of course, we were able to use some of the technology facilities provided in our classrooms. And mashallah, some of us were expert teachers in digitalizing their teaching materials, evaluation, and assessment. However, most of us were still somehow do not have enough information about using online teaching. The situation has become totally different during the past 2 years for all of us teachers around the world. Even those who are ignorant in technology, they were able to teach themselves, and we were all able to communicate with our students through platforms, different platforms. We were able to design exams and assess our students. Now, through this experience, which showed us that we should go with the flow, we are able to change. We should not stick to one method, and we should not stick to one school of teaching. Everything around us is changing. Technology is changing. Students are changing, and we ourselves are changing. So we should not stay and stick to just one way in our life. Now, my question to you, your experience of the past 2 years, how can you characterize it into 1 or 2 words? Whether your experience is positive or negative, whether you like it, you don't like it. I just want to hear your feedback. How do you characterize it? Would you please post it in the chat to find out how do you feel about it? Positive, effective, easier, okay, interesting, enjoyable. If you have the choice to choose now between online teaching and face-to-face teaching, which one you are going to choose? I'm not talking about our special circumstances. I don't want to leave. For example, some teacher would say, I don't want to leave my kids at home. I have some problems. No, we're not talking about special cases. We are talking about how effective it is for the students and for the teacher. Face-to-face, both, okay? online, face-to-face teaching, blended, okay, thank you, blended, both, all right. So this is the idea which I want to talk about, that online teaching experience, it has lots of difficulties, okay? We all struggled at the beginning, but there were many benefits, and these benefits are exemplified here in something that is called blended learning, which I think that this semester or this year, we are going to get use of what we call blended learning. Now, when I say blended learning, we have to look at both sides. Face-to-face learning, which is actual or physical learning at classroom or in the classroom. And we have the online learning that involves video, technology, platform, and you don't see your students physically. Everything is done behind the screen. And the thing we want to focus on today is taking something from both sides. I can use the benefits of face-to-face learning, and I can use also online learning, which is the blended learning. Now, the point that I'm going to talk about now today is that blended learning is an area, and there are many approaches under blended learning. One of them, which I'm going to present today, is the flipped classroom, okay, which I personally used last year, and I found it very effective with my students. Okay. Now, before I start talking about blended learning, let me just recall some old schools of teaching English. We have traditional classroom. Now, when I say the traditional classroom of English, what is the first thing you think about? When I say traditional classroom of English, what do you think about now? Face-to-face, very good. This is very important for traditional classroom. It focuses on the teacher. Yes, this is the point that I want to talk about. Lectures, teacher talk only. Thank you very much. Interesting. Now, right, traditional classroom, whether I am talking about the audiolingual method, or I'm talking about the direct method, or I am talking about what other methods we can use, the audiolingual, the direct method, whatever methods you are talking about, or the grammar translation method, it's all characterized by being teacher-centered approach. And if you look at this picture, it will characterize very well how is the teacher-centered approach. Teacher is the center of the classroom. Teacher is supposed here to be just like an encyclopedia of knowledge. She's supposed to, or she or he is supposed to answer all of the questions without letting the student take the least effort to search for information. She had to come up with the most brilliant or most exciting presentation in order to grab student attention and make them focus on the material. She has to do lots of things in order to brainstorm. And if you look here, what are the students doing? They are just looking at the teacher, listening, focused for maybe 30, 35 minutes. Teacher is talking. The only thing they are doing, taking notes. Sometimes if they are just following up, they are going to ask some question. They can also ask the teacher to repeat and repeat until they understand well. Okay, now what is happening here? This is the situation in the class. Okay, now I don't want to say or criticize this method, because we are all graduate from these old schools, and mashallah, we are all good teachers now. Okay, but this is not applicable for nowadays. At this time, this method is putting all the cognitive load on the teacher. She's doing all the thinking in the class. Students are not thinking like the teacher. And what is happening, if I want to talk about this from psycholinguistics point of view, now the information, if the students are going to listen or gain this information, and this information or this knowledge is not processed in their short-term memory, short after gaining this knowledge, it's going to be lost. It's going to be forgotten. It's not going to be retrieved or stored in the long-term memory. And in this case, when the time of the exam comes, Students are not going to retrieve the information. They are going again to study as if this is a very new material. Why? Because there was not enough time in the classroom to give enough application at the end of the class or in the class. Most of the time of the class for just having or knowing the new material. So this is the place of the classroom. Now, what is happening at home? At home, this is, let me give you an example of a typical math class. Teacher is in the classroom. She is explaining everything on the board, all problems and all formulas. And then she gives some piece of homework to the students. When the students go home to apply what they have got, they feel that they are in trouble and they are struggling. And why is that? Because they are alone. And do you think that the teacher is able to explain the unit again? Is she able to look at every single homework and let the students do a first draft and a second draft? There is no time for this. So what is happening is that students sometimes feel lost. This is mainly the teacher-centered approach here. Now, I give you just the introduction here, just to focus on what is happening now. Now everything is changed. Students are changed. Life is changed. Lots of facilities of technology in our day. Students of nowadays, if you compare them to students of 20 years ago, of course, there are lots of differences. Now, nowadays, students are sometimes much smarter. You can find students who are native-like. Our students nowadays have short attention span. They cannot focus for 30 or 40 minutes continuously following the teacher without getting bored. They have lots of other interests than other students or students of the past. So we need to take all of these stuff into consideration. That's why we need to vary in our approaches. Now, this is the typical classroom. What are we going to talk about today is the flipped classroom. Let me see. To give a better idea, the traditional classroom and the flipped classroom, both of them involve two spaces. The traditional classroom involves, first of all, it starts by a group space where the teacher is there with the other students at the time of the classroom, having a face-to-face time, and this is devoted for the lecture. And then the time for home, where the student is alone, and we call this the individual space. Students are studying and revising and doing the homework. This is the typical classroom or traditional classroom. However, the thing we want to talk about is the flipped classroom, where you will start by the lecture, individual space, students receive the information at home, and then after that, there will be time in the class with the teacher, with the group, doing some activities. So this is the main idea for the flipped classroom. Now, the question is, I want to flip my class, but what exactly we are flipping? Are we flipping the role between teacher and student? Are we flipping the lessons? Are we flipping the places? Or what we are flipping exactly? Can you just, the role, all right? Okay, what else? What are we flipping? Everything, okay. The role, the places, okay. The technique, information, okay. Now, what we are exactly flipping here is the content. The place where the content is delivered and the procedure where content is delivered. Now, I want to stress one thing. We are introducing here the flipped classroom and how successful it is. But we are English language teachers. We know that there are many frameworks and approaches. We cannot say that one approach is perfect. There is nothing perfect. If one approach is suitable for one lesson, it might not be suitable for another lesson. If it is suitable for this group, it might not be suitable for another group. So you are, as a teacher, are going to judge. You are, according to your experience, are going to decide which method I am going to use. Now, the flipped classroom is very suitable in case of blended learning, in our cases nowadays, our situations, and there are specific types of lesson where flipped classroom are very effective, and there are other better methods for other classrooms to be processed in this way. So here, I'm going to give you some examples of where you are going to flip your classroom. To make this very clear, first of all, we have to erase the misconception of mixed classroom or misapplication of the flipped classroom. Because some people might say, oh, okay, this is not a new idea. I used to do this before. I can send my students a link from YouTube the night before related to my lesson. I let them watch, and then the day after, we are going to be done. Another might say, I'm going to give my students the number of the page from their textbook. They are going to prepare, and then they are going to come done. Some might say, I'm going to let one of the students prepare. She's going to present and she's going to explain this to the students, and I'm done. This is a misapplication for the flipped classroom. The idea is much bigger than that. It's a framework. It's not a process. Okay, there should be some objectives for this idea. Now, it's not about watching videos before class only. It's not about reading the new lesson from a textbook. The idea is much bigger than that. Yes, there are videos. Videos are very essential here. And there are some criteria for choosing and making the videos, but it's not all about that. What is it? As experts said, flipped learning is a framework that enables educator to reach every student. I want you to pay attention to this word, reach every student. That was a dream long time ago by some expert. They said that our goal or our dream is to find a teacher for every single student. Of course, this is a hypothetical sentence. We are unable to give a student or a teacher for every student. But somehow in the flipped classroom, teaching can be somehow personalized. So the flipped approach inverts the traditional classroom in the course concept before class, allowing educators, who are the teachers, to use class time to guide each student through active, practical, innovative application of the course concept. So it's not only by giving them the material the day before, there are lots of works to be done and preparation after that. Okay. I want now to relate this to Bloom's taxonomy in order to make things clearer, because Bloom's taxonomy forms the basis for us as a teacher in the case of evaluation and assessment. Now, if you look at this hierarchical model of evaluation, I'm sure that all of you are familiar with this. I don't mean that I'm using the basic Bloom's taxonomy or the revised one. My idea here is just to divide the level into two, or all the levels into only two levels. The basic two levels, remember and understand. I'm going to refer to these two levels as the level of knowledge, knowing, معرفة, just to know. I'm not talking about using, to know. Now, is it a big deal to make students know the meaning of words? Is it a big deal to make students know how to pronounce these words? Is it a big deal to make the students know the names of parts of the body? Or what is the difference between homophones? Knowing itself is something very basic. They can gain this information nowadays very easily by using Google, by watching some videos, by looking at pictures. Sometimes it makes it possible and it makes it easier. So the idea here of the flipped classroom is that you devote these two levels of thinking, which is usually here done in class. See, they are very basic. They don't need much effort. They can be gained very easily. But what is happening is that they are done in class by the teacher. And for the other higher levels of thinking that involve application, analysis, evaluation, and creation, they are done at home, while student is doing this alone. Okay, so sometimes application can be also done at home. So this is, sorry, in class, this is in between, but I'm referring to the other higher level of thinking to be done at home. So experts were asking, why don't we flip this taxonomy? Why don't we flip this idea to start by home and then in class? So what is the shape of the taxonomy? It's going to be upside down. The lowest level of thinking, it doesn't take much time, okay? So remembering and understanding are done at home. They are introduced to the students at home, whereas the other higher levels of thinking, like application, analysis, evaluation, I'm going to devote all of these to be done in the class. This is the idea of the flipped classroom. It is clearer now when we are relating this to Bloom's taxonomy. In order to make things clearer, I'm going to give you an example. Sorry, before this, some people or some experts said we give Bloom's taxonomy a diamond shape. Since we are not devoting very long time for creation is not, or creativity is not applicable for all lessons and for all classes. So no matter what the shape is, the most important thing here is that we are looking for the concept. Okay, I'm going to give you a very simple example, okay, about how to flip your classroom, keeping in mind Bloom's taxonomy. This is very, very basic example, okay? I'm not dedicating first grade or high school or university. I just want you to think of the concept here. Now, for the new vocabulary, suppose that my lesson tomorrow is going to be these words: farm, harvest, flour, dough, water, and bread. Now, if you excuse me, most of my examples are going to be connected to baking and cooking because this is my area of interest. Now, all of the time we're looking for things that interest students. Why don't we look at things that interest us as teacher? So you are going to look here at lots of baking and cooking stuff. Now, let's look here: farm, harvest, flour. All of these words, I'm going to give them or introduce them to my students. But I don't think that it is a big deal to make students know the meaning of these words, okay? Just a few pictures or a video can make it very easy. Just the pronunciation by a native speaker might be better than me to tell them how to pronounce the words correctly. So I'm going to send this for my students the day before. So I am done with knowing the meaning. What shall I do in class? Students know the meaning, students know the pronunciation. What am I doing in class? What is my objective? What is the objective usually decided for teaching vocabulary? In classroom, we have spelling. For example, I'm going to prepare lots of exercises regarding spelling, pronunciation, because at the end, I don't want the students only to know, I want them to use. So by the end of the lesson, I want the students to use these words in a meaningful sentence. However, for example, do I want them to use it in speaking, in situations, or I want them to use it in a paragraph, for example. So I'm going to prepare lots of activity. If I'm going to have lower levels of students spelling, put the words according to their alphabetical order, look at silent letters, dictation, practice pronunciation, practice homophones, for example, comparing them with other words that they have taken before, relating these words, try to compare and contrast. For higher level of students, I'm going to talk about parts of speech, nouns, countable, uncountable, singular, plural. I'm going to look at the verbs, regular and irregular verb, and by the end, which is my objective, to let students use. Okay, so here mainly these are the levels of application, analysis, and evaluation. What about creativity? How can I jump into the level of creativity with only one word? Such a lesson that can be boring, okay, and a very typical lesson. What shall I do? One of the ideas, and you can go creative here and make your students more creative. What can we do? I can ask the student to make a story out of these words. I can ask the students to find the relation between all of these words. What's in common? How can you make them into a chain? For example, the farmer is in the farm, harvested the seed, made flour, ground the seed, made flour, used the flour to make a dough, knead the dough, adding some water, and at the end, they come up or they have or baked a bread. Okay, so here, every group of students are asked to give or come up with a story. The winner is the one who is coming with the most exciting story. This exciting story is going to be written. If it is perfectly done, it's going to be used in a bulletin board. It's going to, for example, give a chance for the writer to participate in the monthly magazine of the classroom, whatever you can use in order to reward your students, not necessarily to give them grade. So the most important thing here is that one of the advantages of the flipped classroom is that the teacher can exclude the idea of homework. There is no need for homework. If we think about homework, why do we give students homework? You as a teacher, why do you give students homework? What's the purpose? To practice, okay. Assessment, revise, very good. Practice, improve, application. Okay, right. Sometimes you can say marks, okay, grades. I can divide the grades or devote the grade for something else. But my main interest here is to check their understanding, to check that they are practicing. In my flipped classroom, I can make them practice in class. I can give them time for practicing in class, checking their homework. If I don't have enough time, there are lots of digital apps that can make me follow up with my students. So students are going to love this because this is the class where there is no homework. I'm going to go free at home. There is nothing that I have to do, okay? But we shouldn't do this all the time. We should vary. For example, 1 or 2 flipped classroom during the week is enough for them to make them not feel bored, okay, and don't feel it as a routine. But in this way, they are going to love this and they are going to wait for this technique. Okay, this is an idea of how to flip the classroom. Another example. Suppose my lesson tomorrow is about preposition, in, on, under, over, above, whatever they are. Is it a big deal to make students know what is the meaning of on, above, over, or in front? I don't think so. Giving the students, sending them a video about this will make them just understand. So what I'm going to do in class, I'm going to bring this box and I'm going to bring the ball and I will ask the student to perform this in front of me, or I do it and they tell me what am I doing, or one of them is performing, putting the ball in the box, over the box, under the box, okay, and they are telling her what she is doing. Okay, so there are plenty of activities you can do after using this method. Another example, homophones. Is it also a big deal to make students that 8 and 8 are pronounced in a similar way, or bowl and bowl, or allowed and allowed? I don't think that's a very big deal, specifically if you are having or accompanying this with a picture in front of them. So you can devote the class time for using these words in sentences, for example, or connecting them to other examples. Now, طبعا, it's not a very big deal to make students know, but the time I spend at the beginning of the lesson to make students prepared, to make students brainstorm, okay, sometimes it takes time to make students ready, but when they are in class prepared, having previous knowledge, this will help me a lot. Okay, now we have also the way here, this is for higher level students. I mean the idea of a gerund, putting, for example, a verb plus ing. Read, it's going to be reading, write is writing, and my favorite hobby is writing. This is different from I am writing. I don't talk about using, I'm talking only about receiving and understanding. Application, this is the time in the class. Right. Now, if you look here at grammar. This is a point of debate, which I am going to argue about. There are lots of experts in flipped classroom. They like to flip their grammar classes. Me personally, I don't like to flip my grammar classes, because in this way, I'm going to teach grammar in a very explicit way. If I'm going to teach passive, unless students are familiar with the passive voice, okay? If you are going to introduce the passive for them, you are going to make it as a rule, subject plus verb plus object, and then the subject of the first sentence is going to be object of the second sentence, and then you are going to put the verb in past, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you are going to give it as a rule, which is not very effective in case of flipped classroom. So how can I use grammar in my flipped classroom? I'm going to show you one of the ways of how you can impose grammar in flipped classroom in the next example. Okay, before I give you ways of implementation, let's talk about the history of flipped classroom. Now, some of us might say that this is not totally new, because we used to introduce this method before by asking students to prepare the day before, or by sending them video, for example. Some might say, no, this is new, because in the past, not all students have access to the internet, for example, to check that they have watched the video thoroughly. Okay, now both of you are right. This started by Alison King, a teacher of the English language, in 1993. What did he do? First of all, he videoed himself, okay, explaining the lesson, and then he sent the video to his students, and he took the feedback the next day. His students find the idea very successful, very interesting and useful. Why is that? They said that we were able to pause our teacher. We were able to repeat and repeat without feeling shy, asking the teacher to repeat the information again and again. So that was the beginning of the flipped classroom. Now, if I want to introduce any new method to my class, if I want, let me give you an example. If I want to buy a new machine in my house, there should be a reason why I want this machine. Why I want, maybe I have a problem and I want this machine to help me. I have a problem in my class and I want this method to help me. So what are the usual problems that any teacher can have? Specifically, the English language teacher. Very good, excellent. Time is the most important part. If teacher is going to explain for 30 minutes, for example, and then she needs time for application, and then she needs time for giving homework and checking the homework or repeating, for those students who do not understand, time is a big problem or obstacle for reaching your goal. Very good. The next problem here are the individual differences. You cannot go to one class and find that they are all at the same levels. You find fast learners and you find slow learners. You find native-like students. You find students who have short attention span. You have students with different learning styles. For example, we have auditory students and visual students, kinesthetic students. All of them are different, and students of nowadays are really different than students of, let's say, 10 years ago. And she also faces problem of engaging the students. What I am going to do in order to make my students engaged in my class, to grab their attention, to make them focused. Specifically for the teachers of young learners, sometimes they turn themselves into clowns in order to grab their attention. So what are the things to make them engaged? There is another problem, which is dependent learners. Sometimes students feel that the teacher is responsible for everything. Teacher is responsible for explaining. She did not explain this. This is not, I'm not going to be responsible. If teacher is absent, she is responsible. If I am absent, teacher is responsible. If I didn't understand, teacher has to explain everything again and again. And students is only a receiver. Okay, it's just like a spoon feeding. So we need to overcome the idea of dependent learners. We need to make students feel somehow responsible. It's his duty to be an independent learner, and to move towards autonomy. Another problem, reach every student. How can I reach every student? How can I explain again and again for every student? How can I be with my student at home to explain this? Another part is interaction. Interaction. This is very important aspect for language teaching. Now, we as language teachers, we are different from other teachers of math, teacher of chemistry, and any other teachers, because we are not teaching words and sounds. We are not teaching them for the sake of the exam. At the end, we are teaching language. We want them to use this and to speak. I'm not going to be happy if my students memorize a paragraph and they copy this paragraph in the final exam and she got the full mark. And after all, she cannot write a meaningful sentence or a correct sentence. I'm not going to be happy if my students memorize something to say it in front of the class, memorize a presentation, but actually she cannot communicate or say a word if she goes to the restaurant or if she goes in a hospital, for example. We are teaching them language. Language means communication. Language means cognitive skills. Language means students, if she doesn't know, she needs to think and she needs to ask and she needs to look for something to answer her questions. So we need to make them feel that you have two goals, my student. You have to reach the goal which you want for your marks, and you have to reach the other goal, the bigger one, for having a language. You need to have intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, or intrinsic and extrinsic reward. So these are the problems that we want the flipped classroom help us to overcome. Right. Again, I'm taking you back to cooking again. Let's find out what do we have here. Suppose that my lesson tomorrow is how to make pizza. Okay. Now I am sending some information to my students, and my interest here is to make them know the meaning of the words that are used for making pizza, like dough, waterproof, yeast, basil, for example, tomato paste, need, for example, the silent letter in the word need, plus telling them how to use or how to make a process. And number 3, implicitly, I'm going to teach them the form of imperative, which is related to grammar. But I'm not going to tell them this here. If you look here, there is nothing mentioned about grammar. Now, some people might say our classes or our schools are not afforded with the places or facilities to perform projects, for example. Now, my goal is to make them know how to write a process or describe a process or imperative. This can be done with only using a paper or glue and scissors, for example, like making something by the paper. So let's take this hypothetically that my class is ready or supplied with all materials that I need. So I'm going to use this, okay, to send it to my students. All right, but I'm going to make it very basic pizza. I know that my students have some a background of making pizza. Maybe some of them are expert. So I'm going to give them only the basic, okay, in order to make them or give them chance for creativity. So what is going to happen at the time in class? They are going to put hand on the project, on the material. They are going to tell me how to make pizza. So I am telling them, please describe this. So one of them is going to say, put water, add the yeast, mix the dough, knead the dough. So I'm asking her, what did you say? You said put water. Why did you say put water? Didn't we say that all our sentence should start with a subject? So why did you start with a verb? Here, she's going to pay attention. Yes. So I did not put a verb, but this is true. This is correct. This is the form of imperative that I use for recipes, I use for instruction, I use for direction, like go, straight on, turn right, turn left, close your book, open the door. You will find that most our talking today involves imperative. And we are doing this like a child who acquires the language. So it's something acquired implicitly in an indirect way, just like the teacher, sorry, just like the child acquiring the language as a first language acquisition. So it serves your purpose here to make students get familiar to the new form, okay, without giving it directly. So there are many ways in order to check their understanding while they are at home. If you look at these exercises, this is just to check understanding. It's not for using, okay? Matching, true, false is also here mainly to check for understanding. Okay, now, again, what we are doing here in the class of pizza, we are mainly relating between what happens at home and what is happening in class. And actually, if I go deeper here, I am relating between two theories, okay? The first theory is the thing that my students have done at home. What is it? Number one, behaviorism, okay? Now, what is the meaning or what is behaviorism? Now, while they are at home, my student is working alone. My student is reading, is thinking, and trying to check for the things that he finds, for example, somehow difficult. It's all happening alone. And this follows the school of behaviorism. When the student is in class, this is constructivist. Student is not alone. Student is in a group work or group situation, sharing information and doing collaborative work. So here, what are we gaining? This is one of the newest approaches of teaching English, communicative competence. And not only ensuring language knowledge, stressing language use. After all, we want our students to use the language. What is the purpose? For making my students know when do I put the S in the third person singular, and I know that I'm going to put ing here, and if I give them question in the exam, they are able to know and answer. But when they are in a presentation, when they write a paragraph, totally wrong. They don't use this. So what is the point here? I want them to use all the information, all the parts of grammar, all punctuation mark in their production, in their writing and in their speaking. So this is one way to letting my students or helping my students in order to use the parts I am talking about. Okay. Now, let's move to, before I talk about the role of the teacher, okay, sorry. Okay, before I talk about the role of the teacher, some of us might be asking, which lesson? You said that not every approach is suitable for every lesson. Okay, so which lesson I am going to flip? Now, the question here is for you as a teacher. Which lesson you think your class needs to be flipped? Sometimes if you teach in more than one school, you teach more than one student, you teach in more than one city, you find that there are mistakes students do every time, regardless their school, regardless their teacher. There are repetitive mistakes. Now, for me as a teacher, I taught in Riyadh, I taught in Jeddah, I taught in Mecca, but I could notice during all these years that my students make the same mistake wherever they are. When they write a sentence, they say, she is go, we are leave, I am eat. So I tell them this is not English. This doesn't follow any structure of grammar in English. So either say she goes or she is going. What is this? Now, the things that you find students usually make mistakes in, this is the thing that you have to focus on. Maybe the simple present tense is mentioned in your textbook once during the whole term, but we can impose this in many flipped classrooms to make students practice and draw their attention about the mistakes here. By the way, this mistakes is not because the student is not smart. It's not because the student is lazy and she doesn't study. This is something referred to as a second language acquisition second language acquisition issue, like L1 transfer. Like, for example, let me just give you an example. We find that there are lots of students or lots of speakers of English, I mean foreign learners of English, when they talk, they will say subjective pronoun, objective pronoun. صح ولا لا? They will say next. They will say first. Now, why they are doing this? Mainly Arabic people. This is an issue of L1 transfer. They are transferring the rules of phonology from Arabic into English. Okay? Syllabification of the last coda of the first syllable with the first onset of the second syllable. Like, for example, you will find some Iraqi people will say al-khidmat al-elektroniya. Okay, so كلمة elektroniya, they are going to make it, pronounce it in the Arabic way. Okay, so we can also make our students, if my intention is to make them fluent, is to make their accent better and better, I need also to draw their attention to these parts. Okay, let's go back now. The role of the teacher. So you might be telling me that from the very beginning, you are saying that we don't want to make the class teacher-centered approach. The teacher is no more the star of the class and so on. No, this is not my idea. I'm not saying that teacher matters less. No, here, teachers matter more. Teacher needs to prepare more. There are lots of loads for the teacher, preparing activities, application, being there with the students, with each student in doing the application and in doing homework. There are lots of loads in the teacher, and there are lots of preparation. But this is the case in all student-centered approaches. You need to do lots of effort, because what you are going to gain after that is not a student who will answer questions in the exam. No, students who is having a self-confidence and students who know what she wants from studying the language. Okay, so here my idea of the role of the teacher, we are not neglecting the teacher. No, we want the teacher just to understand why she's flipping the English classroom. Why specifically English? English, after all, is a language. It are not only sounds and words. We are not only teaching sounds and words. We are teaching language at the end, and we want them to think, we want them to use, we want them to behave, and we want them to think of the culture of the new language. Okay. Now, for the next part, implementation. If I am now happy with this approach, I like it very much, and I find that it is successful, I want to use it. I want to use it in my class. So how to plan? How to plan my class? What do you think? If you want to start using the flipped classroom, what are you going to do? First of all, how to plan for your flipped classroom? Can you give me an idea? What are you going to start with? Is it something that I can think about the night before of the class, or I need to have preparation? First of all, yes, thank you very much. I need to choose the lesson. Okay, I need to have a goal. Excellent. This is the most important thing. Why? Why specifically this lesson needs to be flipped? What's my purpose? What's my objective? So there should be a plan. Now, you need sufficient time ahead. It shouldn't be done just the night before or the day before. You should have sufficient time ahead. Now, the most important thing also is that you need to specify your platform. Are you going to use Blackboard? Are you going to use Teams? Whatever platform you are using, it should be prepared. It should be ready, because it's going to serve as a library. So what all the videos that we are going to produce or we are going to choose are going to be stored in your library as a content for students to refer to them whenever they want. Okay, so you have here to prepare sufficient time ahead. And number 2, keep in your mind your students' level. How are you going to deal with this? Okay, how I am going to think about their age, their interest. Okay, my students like to watch videos. My students like to follow YouTubers and vloggers. Okay, so I'm going to be in front of them like a YouTuber, for example. Okay, so I need also to think about the culture of my students. Who are the students I'm teaching? Okay, so this is also very important. Yes, the level of the students is one of the very important parts. Like, your videos, this is essential, but I'm going to leave it to the next part because I'm going to show you some of the videos designed for this case. Type, gradually increase the material. If I am going to flip my classes, I shouldn't flip the whole lesson all at once. I can start by flipping parts of the lesson. Let me give you this example, okay, of using a comma. Now, I can flip the lesson of punctuation mark, but from the very beginning, that sounds difficult, okay? I can flip using commas, but from the very beginning, try to specify which use of the comma. There are many uses of the comma. So one of them is the use of a comma using but. Okay, so my idea here is that you start by 1 point, okay, and you gradually move to a higher one. Type. You need also to set minor goals. You have your goals, as you said, okay, you have your main objective, but try to think of other goals to be served within your flipped class. Now, I like to impose some rules of grammar implicitly, okay, especially the rules that some students find it a little bit confusing or difficult, like the if conditional. Okay, if conditional, whether it is zero conditional, first, second, or third conditional, they are very confusing for the students. So let me give you an example here. I'm introducing something for my students. Let's say this video is intended for showing them a story of two girls going to the gym, okay, and I'm looking for the words that are used in the gym, since many of the lifestyles nowadays involves students who like to keep fit and going to the gym. So what are the words used here? So let me see, or I want you to look here.
Do you still drink cola in the evening? Yes, I do. If you didn't drink cola in the evening anymore, you would be sleepy. Okay, I've stopped drinking cola in the evening. It's so much effort to make. If I don't lose weight, I will be disappointed. If I lost weight, I would be happier and more energetic.
Okay, so if you look here, the rules of the if conditional are imposed here, but students are not asked in their home to understand this. This is going to be done in class while the teacher is asking them, for example, what's wrong with this girl? Is she fat? Does she want to be slimmer, for example? What's she going? So you are going to ask them question and write these answers in the board, and you are going to find or take them into the rule in an indirect way. So this is one part of getting a minor goal. Now, using rubrics also is very effective for us as teachers. And we here, it's advisable to use, again, Bloom's taxonomy for your, as a rubric, okay, to find out until which level you have reached. It's not necessarily all the time to reach the highest level of creativity. Application, analysis, and evaluation are mostly sufficient in most classes. And I just want you to look here at the lowest level of thinking, remembering and understanding. True, they are having very short time. They are not taking much space, but it doesn't mean that students are going to spend only 5 minutes watching this. The video is 5 or 10 minutes. However, students can repeat it plenty of times. They can watch it again and again. Okay, they can repeat, they can pause at their own pace, at their own interest. Okay, so I'm not talking about the time for knowing that it is only 5 or 10 minutes. Okay, now let's come here to the most important part in our flipped classroom, which is the material, the basic thing here, which is the video. Now, as we said that the founder of this method have videoed himself. This is originally what is happening, that you as a teacher are going to video yourself explaining the lesson and then sending this lesson to the students. Now, this video shouldn't be a long video. It should be maximum 10 minutes for intermediate students and less than that for lower levels of students. And you are going to have many short videos, like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, instead of one long one, just to make sure that you are grabbing student attention and make them focused and not thinking of something else. Now, sometimes teacher might be saying, how can I be sure that my students are watching the video? There are some ways that while you are designing the video, after 2 minutes, pop up, for example, a window, using an assessment app, for example, and ask students some questions, just true, false, or fill in blanks, or a multiple choice to check that they watched, they understand, and they are following up, okay? And everything, you are going to see it in your record. This is an idea. So now let's look here. This is a video from the YouTube, but this is a typical video for a teacher explaining something to her students about the idea of silent letter. Let's see.
Hello, how are you? Welcome to the lesson of words with silent letters. A silent letter is a letter that we don't say. This is one of the reasons why spelling. I myself hate spelling in English for this reason, and also pronunciation in English is so...
Okay, now how do you find this teacher? What's she doing? I think that she's trying to personalize her teaching. She knows who are the students she is addressing. Yes, she's using body language. She's using metalinguistics signs in order to make her students understand more, because she's not seeing them here, but she wants to make sure that they are focusing and she's grabbing their attention, using, for example, sh as a silent letter, for example. Okay, so you don't need to be a YouTuber or a vlogger in order to make a super duper, for example, a video. It just need good lighting. It should be clear and serving your point and serving your goal. However, for us teachers as a female, this might seem quite difficult to video ourselves, but we can do this without being visible. We can use the iPad, for example, write and just record our voice, and then we can send this to the student to be available for them, watching them anytime they want. There is another method. If you don't want to video this, the internet library is full of many precious materials. So if my lesson here is the silent letter, I can get another video of silent letters serving the same purpose, for example. So it serves also the same purpose if you watch it as the first video. Sorry. Type. If you want to choose the ready-made videos, there are many criteria that you need to pay attention to. Number one, you need to choose it very carefully. You need to look at the cultural related issues, okay? There are sometimes some taboos, for example. There are things that are not related to our religion. You have to be very careful about every single thing, so that, for example, the parent will not say what are our students studying, for example. Okay, so you need to be careful about this. You need to watch the video from the beginning till the end. Don't say that this is a very suitable video, I'm just going to send it to the students without watching it. You have to watch it from the very beginning until the end. You need to know also that it is authentic from a trusted website. Okay, so there are lots of criteria that you need to use. Okay, and the most important thing also is that you don't put too much information. Your video serves your goal only. Don't make the students bother by lots of information that are not related to your goal. Okay, طيب. This is about the videos that we are going to use. You have to pay attention to them, and because they form the basis of the things that we are going to do in class. طيب. There are some few tips that I want you to pay attention to while flipping your classes. Now, before I start this, I need to explain my approach to my students. Why? Because I don't want them to think that I'm just trying to break the routine. I'm just doing this as a kind of change or letting do my job. I want them to understand everything from the very beginning. Just like when you tell your students about the syllabus, about the distribution of the weeks, about yourself from the very beginning, tell them that you are using this approach in order to make them feeling the responsibility and taking it seriously. You have to know what you are expecting from them. The next tip is a kind of assessment. How are you going to assess your student? We are not, it's up to you. Do you want to use grades, for example, if there's no homework? So how I'm going to follow up with my students? Here, you are free to choose whatever assessment app you can choose. So one of these apps, which I find very helpful in case of flipped classroom, and I'm sure that there are others, but lots of experts of flipped classroom suggested this app, which is called Socrative. Here, in this app, you are able to send some quizzes and find the students, are they following up with you or not? And at the same time, you can monitor here, for example, you can, for example, start the video, pause, give them some questions, and then continue the video. Now, other thing is that you can follow up. This is taken from a participant using the flipped classroom. So here, it's very easy to find out who is the student who is answering very well, who is the student who doesn't know the answer, who is the student answering all questions well, the best student, who is the student who doesn't know the answer, who is the student still having trouble, and you need to focus with this student. طيب. One thing is that you have to teach the students how to watch a video. Now, watching a video here is not similar like watching an anime or watching Spider-Man, for example. This is totally different. One of the teachers said that he used to teach his students 2 weeks before starting this method of how to watch a video. Watching a video is watching with thinking, watching critically, reflecting, and taking notes. Okay, they are asked about everything. Since the video is not long, so they are supposed to know every single thing mentioned in the video. طيب. Some might be asking, how can I know that my students are engaged? How can I know that they like this? What do you think? How can I know that those students like my approach and they prefer it rather than a traditional classroom? How can I check that? Do you get an idea? Do you get an idea, please? Okay, I think that, yeah, participation by participation. One of the ideas also, are they enjoying my classes or not? Also, to ask them, for example, to ask about their feedback. You can also give them a survey. And one of the brilliant ideas that I read about is that you can make your students do their own flipped classroom. And instead of asking the students, tomorrow you are going to explain this lesson, make your students make a flipped classroom. In this way, you ensure that the whole class is participating, the whole class is engaged. the student is doing what you are doing in order to make the whole class engaged. So this is a very brilliant idea to check that your students are engaged. Okay, now some of us might be asking, is the flipped classroom suitable for online learning? That is perfectly suitable for online learning. However, you have to consider making some break rooms, and consider also using assessment apps that I think that this is very, very important to follow up with your students, since you are not meeting them in classes. Okay, so in this way, I can ensure that my students is learning more deeply, since information is retrieved many times and processed many times. And here also, I am personalizing the learning, okay? I'm personalizing the learning in the way students can watch this at their own pace. Students can be very comfortable at home, drinking their coffee, and staying very comfortable, watching, pausing, repeating, okay? So this is kind of personalizing, where I am dedicating every student. And this suits today's learner. How? In what way? How today's learners are different from other learners? How they are different from those learners who are in who used to be in the traditional classrooms? Yeah, the Z generation, very good. They are students of technology. Now, what I notice about those students is that they want to know why more. Yeah, like in the past, we used to give the student the rule. We'll say, this is the rule, you follow the rule. Nowadays, students want to know why. So why do I say this? Like, for example, when we tell the students about silent letters, like, for example, let's say the word sign and signature. Now we tell them, here you don't pronounce the G, but in signature you pronounce the G. In resign and resignation, in bomb and bombardee. It's just like that. This is English, but students want to know why I don't pronounce it. GN and GN, this is the same. Why I don't pronounce it. So I might tell the students, I need you to do a research about this and answer me. And I'm pretty sure that they are not going to get the correct answer. So here I'll be again the star of the class, and I'm going to tell them what is the difference between sign and signature, which is the same like what is the difference between can you help me, or could you help me? Okay, past and present, polite and more polite, but why? What's the reason? Here, students just want to know why, okay? Not only to know what and how. Okay, now the next part, these are, it suits today's learners, and also it is a chance for peer tutoring. Sometimes there are learners who are unable to understand my videos. So this is a chance for peer tutoring in class. Some smarter students or fast learner students have the chance to explain for their peers. Okay, now there are more chances to ask questions. Now we as teachers, we become very happy when our students come up with a question. It shows that they are alert. It shows that they are they are active, and they are communicating with me, and they think about and absorb the material that I ask them. So when they are at home watching the videos, for sure there are things that they are just they have some question about, okay? So this is a very good chance for arguing in class. They might argue with each other, okay? Changing their point of view and talking as a whole in class. Okay, the next part, this is also a very good chance to fill the class time with extra activities, especially for younger learners who like to do things, who like to be praised, who likes to show what did they do or their achievement, and then the teacher is clapping for them and praising them. So this is a very good chance to know your students and to know each one what is the thing that she likes to do. And of course, what most students like is homework is not a burden anymore. Oh, I like this class because there is no homework. When the teacher is going to do this class again? Okay, imagine that everything is done at home, put the books, and then you go home without any burden and you understand fully. So this is a very good advantage for using the flipped classroom, and you need to mention this for your student so they work hard in class in order not to have homework. Okay, so everything is done in the class. And this is also a very good chance for stay-home students. Nowadays, we don't know what is the situation. If some of my students, la samahallah, she got the virus and she is obliged to stay at home for 10 days or 14 days, for example. Of course, she has منصة عين, for example, to follow up, but sometimes she wants to go with the flow with her group. She doesn't want to miss anything. She wants to find out what does the teacher say. So this is a very good chance to make her feel that she's not neglected, that she is still following us and doing the same thing that we are doing, especially if there are some assessment apps that she can answer or submit her answer through. So I find this, the last part, very useful for us as teachers. Okay. Now, there are a few things before I finish. I want you to keep in mind if you are going to flip your classes, that not all classes can be flipped. Think very carefully. What is your goal? What is your objective when you want to flip your classroom? Now, it needs from you preparation and preparation again and again, okay? You don't start this the day before. Please prepare very carefully and try to come up with brilliant ideas. And I would say that this was an issue, let's say 3 years ago, but nowadays internet availability is not a problem at all. No one is living nowadays without the use of internet. No one can go out of his house without the availability of the internet. So this is nothing to make us worry about. Also pay attention to cultural related issues, specifically if you are designing your own video or you are choosing a video from the internet. Be very careful of the things that are not related to our culture or to our religion or the taboo words in the internet. Now, this is a higher level. Okay, this if we want to take the flipped classroom a step further. Now, sometimes teacher might say students are not responding, students are not engaged, students still are not participating in my flipped classroom. Why? Because there are no marks. They are not going to do anything unless they see or I tell them that I put mark for this activity. So what can we do? One of the ways is to gamify the lesson. Now, gamification of an English classroom, like gamifying a writing classroom, is my workshop I presented 2 years ago. But what if we flipped our classroom through the whole semester? That would be something brilliant. That would be something more sophisticated, but it's going to serve a lot here. And I really encourage you to try this and tell me how is it working. Okay, and here, by the end of this session, we talked about traditional classroom and how they were compared to the new methods of teaching or approaches like flipped classroom. And we also introduced the history of a flipped classroom and how did it start. We related this to Bloom's taxonomy, the levels of thinking, and how can we implement the flipped classroom starting from the lowest level of thinking to the level of creativity. We talked about the role of the teacher, that she matters more and she doesn't matter less, okay? Her job is more than that. She is a facilitator. She is still doing lots of things in class. And we talked also about ways or examples of implementation. Don't forget my pizza. and how do you choose your videos? What are the criteria of choosing the video? And there were some tips and pieces of advice and things that you need to pay attention to when designing your flipped classroom. I hope that this session was useful for you, and I want you to try flipping your classes and tell me how did it go. Tell me about your feedback, about your experience, your suggestions and comments on my email or my Twitter account. Thank you very much.